I woke up to silence. Not the peaceful kind that comes with dawn, but the kind that hums in your temples like a stretched string. Once, I lived inside music. Every morning began with keys. Every evening ended in applause. Now my days are an endless pause. My estate stands on a hill above the park. They used to call it the House of Light. Now it's the Mausoleum of Music. In the living room, 7 pianos sleep beneath a film of dust. A Steinway, a Bosendorfer, even an old Bechstein more than a century old. All of them are silent. And so am I. 3 years ago, the accident, fire, screeching metal, and the sound I still hear, the last chord of her laughter. Chloe. She was sitting beside me when the truck veered into our lane. I survived. She didn't, and the hand that once touched the keys became my curse. The doctor said I could still play, but the pain was unbearable, and not just the kind that throbs in the flesh. I stopped going out, stopped giving interviews, stopped touching the piano. Music became the enemy, until one day a short message appeared on my screen. Regarding your listing, I'm interested in the vintage grand piano. May I come see it? From Adaline Rivers. I hadn't planned on selling the instruments. My agent was handling that. But something in her message made me answer personally. She arrived the next morning, petite, wrapped in a coat the color of autumn sky, her hair gathered in a loose knot. She looked no older than 40, and her eyes, clear, soft, like light after rain. She didn't waste a single word, only asked, "Are you Matthew Clarkson?" I nodded. She didn't offer a handshake. Instead, she walked straight to the instruments, touched the lid of the Bechstein as if it were alive. Then she let her fingers glide over the keys, not pressing them, just tracing the ivory, like running a hand along a scar. "Its tone must be deep," she said quietly, with a faint copper warmth, like evening after a storm. I couldn't help but smile. "You talk about it as if it were a person." "Isn't it?" she replied. "Music is someone's soul, too." Then she played a few notes, tentatively, but I froze. There was no virtuosity in her touch, only life. A pure, almost childlike wonder, like the first sound breaking after a long silence. "Do you teach?" I asked. "Yes, at a small studio on Baker Street. Kids, teenagers, the ones who aren't afraid to make mistakes yet." Her smile. It was the kind Chloe once had when she looked at me. "This instrument isn't for sale," I blurted out before I even realized it. "But if you'd like, you can play here. Sometimes." She looked at me, surprised. "You'd let me?" "Yes, but on one condition. No questions about the past." She nodded silently. The first time she came, I stayed in the shadows. She played an old melody, Clair de Lune. Not perfectly, but with such feeling that for the first time in years, I felt something inside me begin to thaw. When the music faded, she asked without turning around, "Why are you hiding in the dark, Matthew?" "Because the light hurts." She laughed softly, almost soundlessly. "Then let's get used to it, gradually." After that, she came every week, and with each hour she spent in that room, there was a little less silence. I caught myself waiting for her footsteps, for the faint scent of coffee and mint that followed her, for her smile when she made a mistake and said, "Mistakes are just another kind of harmony." She never asked about the crash, never looked at my hand with pity. Once, though, she said quietly, "You play even when you're silent. That's rare." One evening, after the sun had gone down, she left a sheet of music on the piano. Almost without thinking, My hand reached for the keys. Pain shot through my fingers. Sharp, familiar, but the sound was alive. And for the first time in 3 years, I didn't feel guilt, only a quiet, burning need to keep playing. That night, I couldn't sleep. For the first time in years, I wrote a few bars of a new melody. It was sad, like a memory, yet warm, like her voice. I didn't know then that this melody would become our last. She always appeared unexpectedly. No call, no warning, just the sound of the door opening and her quiet voice saying, "I brought coffee and a little bit of hope." I'd pretend to grumble, to act annoyed. But inside, something stirred. Her presence broke through my isolation. First a crack, then a fracture, then music. One day she brought an old notebook. "My students wrote this," she said. "They imagine music they can't quite play yet, but someone needs to hear it." She opened to a page, lines drawn by a child's hand, more like heartbeats than notes. "Matthew," she looked at me, "could you arrange this? Just give these notes a shape. You want me to write again?" "Yes," she whispered. "Please." I didn't agree right away, but that evening I sat for hours by the piano, turning the pages of her notebook, thinking maybe this is what coming back really means. Not returning to the stage, but returning to myself. We started working together. She was like fire, one that didn't burn, but warmed, and I, like ash, afraid to fade again. She laughed whenever I muttered that her rhythm was wrong, and always answered, "Wrongness is just honesty, without filters." Sometimes she stayed late. We'd have dinner together, impromptu meals of pasta, wine, and old vinyl records. She could hear music even in the cracks of a worn-out disc. "You know," she said once, gazing out the window, "when I was a kid, I used to think music could heal. And now? Now I think it doesn't heal, it accepts. Even the pain." Her voice trembled, though she smiled. I noticed she'd begun covering her hand with a scarf. Sometimes she'd lose her breath after playing. I didn't ask. I didn't want to break her light with questions. A few weeks later, we finished our first composition together. She named it Aurora, like the light that returns after the darkest night. "You have to play it," she said. "No." "Why not?" "Because if I start, I'll have to keep going, and I'm not sure I can." She was silent for a moment. Then she came closer and placed her hand over mine. "You already survived, Matthew. Now you just have to start living." I pressed the first key. The pain was still there, as sharp as ever, but through it came a sound, pure as dawn. And in that moment, I understood. I could play again. Not because the pain had vanished, but because it had become part of the music. Time passed. People started saying I was coming back. The press found out I was composing again. My agent kept writing, offering concert dates. But the only thing that mattered to me was when she'd come back. Sometimes we argued. "You're too hard on yourself," she'd say, "because the world doesn't forgive weakness." Or maybe, she'd answer softly, "you just haven't forgiven yourself." Her words were like a mirror I didn't want to look into. One evening, she was late. When I finally heard her footsteps, she looked paler than usual. "Are you okay?" "Just tired, a little cold." She smiled faintly. "But I brought you something." It was an old metronome, scratched, the wood faded with time. "It's from my childhood," she said. "So you'll remember, time isn't the enemy. It just listens when we fall silent." That night, she asked me to play Aurora for her. I played. She listened, eyes closed, her breathing uneven. And suddenly, tears. "Why are you crying?" "Because it's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard." A few weeks later, I received an official invitation, a major European tour. The return of a legend, they called it. My agent wouldn't stop calling, saying this was my second career, my chance to become who I once was. I wanted to be happy, but all I could think of was her smile as she listened to my music. She hadn't shown up in over a week, didn't answer messages, and just when I was about to lose hope, the door opened. She stood there, pale, fragile, but smiling all the same. "You disappeared," I said. "I was with the doctor? Is it serious?" She looked away. "Just a little music inside, playing out of tune?" She said it with a smile, but her eyes betrayed the fear. Back then, I didn't know that this would be the last music I'd ever hear alive within her. She stopped coming. Days passed like broken measures without rhythm. I sat by the piano, waiting for the door to open, but it stayed silent. I called. I wrote. No answer. Until one day, an unknown number appeared on my phone. "This is Dr. Grayson," a man's voice said. "Are you a close acquaintance of Miss Rivers?" I couldn't answer at first. "Yes," I whispered. "What happened?" "She asked that we contact you if her condition worsened suddenly. I think you should come." I ran to the hospital, feeling neither pain nor cold. She lay on a white bed, fragile, translucent, like a single note on an untouched page. Her eyes, though weary, still held their light. "You came after all," she smiled faintly. "I was afraid the tour would take you first." "You knew that I was supposed to leave?" "I knew the world wanted to hear you again," she said softly. "And you have to play." I sat beside her and touched her hand, cold but still alive. "What's happening to you, Adaline?" She was silent for a long time before whispering, barely audibly, "I have a muscle disease. It's incurable. I used to play for hours, now only a few minutes. That's why I started teaching. Because when you can't create anymore, you teach someone else to." It felt like all the air in the room disappeared. "And you didn't tell me, because you would have stopped playing," she said softly, "and I needed you to play again." I turned away. For the first time in years, the pain in my hand and the pain in my heart became one and the same. "The tour, I'll cancel it." "No, Matthew." She grabbed my hand, surprisingly strong. "You'll go." "I'm staying." "Don't you dare," she whispered. "If you stay, everything I've done will mean nothing." Her breathing was uneven, but her voice was firm. "When millions listen to you, remember this. You're playing for one person, the one who taught you to hear yourself again." She smiled faintly. "Play Aurora for me, always." A month later, I was standing backstage at a grand hall in Vienna. Lights, applause, the roar of the crowd. It all felt unreal. In front of me stood the piano, the same Bechstein she once touched with her fingers. On it stood the old metronome, her gift. I placed my hand on the keys. The pain was still there, but now it had a sound. I began to play Aurora. Every note carried her breath, her laughter, her mistakes that turned music into something alive. And when the last chord hung in the air, I lifted my head and saw someone in the audience light a small candle. It was one of her students, then another, and another. Dozens of tiny flames flickered across the hall. For a moment I knew she was there, just listening. After that concert, I never went back to my old life. I founded a music studio in her name, a place for children who dream of music even when the world tells them they can't. I don't play often, but every time my fingers touch the keys, I can almost feel her smile beside me. And I can hear her whispering softly, "Music doesn't fade. It just changes the heart it lives in." And I know every concert I play isn't a comeback of a legend. It's the continuation of her life.